Qandeel Baloch or Baloch. It looks like Qandeel Baloch. A Pakistani woman. They called her the Kim Kardashian of Pakistan on Facebook. Someone referred to her that way. And then the Pakistanis gave fake news. They said her brother killed her. It was an honor killing, as they call it. And that was a warning, I guess, that suggesting that Kim Kardashian was negligent of her brother, who was yet unmarried. Robert Kardashian, I guess is his name. And he was not yet married. And she was so thrilled with her marriage. And she was always seen with African American men. And she was gaining prestige from those African American men. And she seemed to be, for a while, negligent of the discomfort of her brother, who had no wife at the time. And the question was raised by the Pakistani fake honor killing. Nobody was killed. That woman was not killed. What if she was so negligent of her brother that her brother, I guess his name is Robert Kardashian, what if Kim Kardashian was so negligent of her brother that her brother killed her? What if? And would she have deserved it for inviting African American men to be the daddies of their house, without seeing to it that her brother would have a wife himself? And then I interpreted that and I wrote about it. And I was also worried about Kim Kardashian and her men. Her men trying to do with young white girls in my neighborhood as for revenge. They said I was an upstart for having a fantasy of a woman who was trying to bait me into a fantasy in a delusional state, or deceive me. And so there were, while Obama was president, Bruce Jenner's little girls were on the stripper pole with these African American men, one from the NBA and the other Kanye West, in the house with the little white girls, and Barack Obama grinning like a Cheshire cat. And I said, they're after these little girls here. When I was in Tennessee, there must be coming after these little girls. They think that they can pick on me. And so under the threat of hostage takers, I became a little too sympathetic to the idea of Robert Kardashian, her brother, without a wife. What if he killed her? But no, I was not ever approving of anyone besides Robert Kardashian, and not necessarily him either. I didn't know. It wasn't proven to me that she was behind a campaign targeting young white girls in my neighborhood to be recruited by African American men. It was not proven to be. It was only suggested. So I had some, it was only speculating, and it was certainly not a conspiracy. I was not involved in the conspiracy. I said, what if he killed her with a exploding computer tablet or something, or like the Israeli exploding cell phone? Just to say, what if he got out of the USA? Would Armenia extradite him back to the USA if he killed her while she was giving out his little sisters to African American men to have sex with, and he was unmarried and she was neglecting her brother? If he did kill her, and in the narrative of this hypothetical, it seemed like the idea of the exploding computer, a remote attack, was the only plot twist that could make it hypothetically plausible that he would be outside of the USA, and he would be in Armenia when they found out what he had done. So that was the reason for that twist in the plot. Sorry to upset people, but I never officially endorsed the idea, and I was not ever convinced that I had a conviction against Kim Kardashian for conspiracy, nor was I convinced that it was appropriate and proportional. It was only speculating on that narrative that the Pakistani instigators had created with their fake honor killing of Qandeel Baloch. Qandeel Baloch. So anyway, just to be clear, it was if hypothetically he had escaped and he was not on the lam running away from justice like a fugitive, he was actually in a foreign country, would a majority of Caucasians be sympathetic to him having killed his sister if he was not she was not arranging for him to meet a wife, and she was not promoting him, and she was negligent of him, and she was giving out his little sisters? And would any man want to tolerate that from a sister? And wouldn't a man be hypothetically justified if that was the case, and he didn't have a wife, and she was giving out his little sisters to African American men to exploit? Anyway, Barack Obama deserves to be injected with estrogen. I'm not an extremist. They're extremists for thinking they get to bully everyone because they're fake slavery hoax. There was no racial slavery of Africans, and they're not justified to demand justice about fake history. And I'm glad Kim Kardashian is alive, but the hypothetical was about would he be extradited if he was already safely in a foreign country, and what would the Iranians say also? Because Armenia is like an Iranian race. They're like Iranians in terms of their racial heritage in Armenia. And so the question was really, is it acceptable what the Kardashians are doing with the daughters of Bruce Jenner? Is it acceptable to her brother? And if her brother hypothetically killed her and escaped justice, and the only way that would be plausible would be he did a remote attack, and he didn't have to flee the country as a suspect. He was already outside of the country when he did it, hypothetically. I guess that was vilifying Armenians and Iranians. They didn't like that, but it was the Pakistanis who brought up the question. Everyone was witnessing Bruce Jenner's little girls on a stripper pole, and these African-American hip-hop oriented guys in the house with his Bruce Jenner's little girls, and Barack Obama grinning like a Cheshire cat. Consider all of that, and the fact that there was no racial slavery of Africans. And they were, African-American men need to recognize there was no racial slavery of Africans. That's not going to last. That temporary advantage of self-justification, that narrative is not going to last. And we have to do a survey to find out how Pacific Asian men who live in proximity with Caucasian men in the same nation, such as in Latin America, we need surveys to get answers from Pacific Asian men on how much they are being disrespected and bullied and oppressed by Caucasian men in Latin America and in Southeast Asia, between India and East Asia, and in Siberia, and also in Central Asia. Are Pacific Asian men going to respond to a survey that says they are being physically menaced and threatened and bullied by larger Caucasian men routinely? Are they being oppressed racially by dishonorable conduct? And if so, are the African Americans and with their bullying um, being portrayed as legitimate avengers on behalf of Pacific Asians who are being bullied by Caucasians in Latin America, Central Asia, Siberia, and in between India and East Asia, in places like um, between Bangladesh and Burma. And are the Pacific Asians being bullied when they are Pacific Asian men? Are they being bullied by Englishmen in New Zealand? We need surveys to get all this information to make a better estimation on exactly what should be the judgment of this tirade of decades of African American men bullying Caucasian men here in the USA. All right, that's all for this video.